Hey guys, we are here today with Nick Mason of Synced Up Designs and Synced Up Audio, and today we are going to be talking about all things audio and the marching arts. What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Good. I feel like I see you every day here since you work here.
Almost,
Yeah.
except for when I'm not.
Except for when you're not here. Out in the field working magic and doing God's work. It's great.
Trying.
Yep. So tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your experience, and why you're here in the marching arts.
Yeah, totally. So, I, just like a lot of people in this activity, marched. I was a member of Chattanooga Independent indoor percussion during high school, marched Music City Mystique on snare drum during college, and then also was a part of the Cavaliers Drum and Bugle Corps up in Rosemont, also on snare drum. During that time during college, I was majoring in audio production and music industry in Middle Tennessee State down here in Murfreesboro. All of that's just to say that once I graduated, I was trying to figure out exactly what to do with the degree that I got and the experience that I had, and how seeing that the marching arts was growing in that field and in that industry, if you want to say, that there was some sort of need for it, especially locally, for like high school programs. So kind of just figuring it out, trial by fire, like sort of figuring out where my place was around here, and also just kind of in the activity. Seeing that need allowed me to, just kind of help out and consult and offer some sort of solutions in regards to people's setups, and being a part of the Cavaliers audio team now and coordinating at Music City Drum Corps has allowed me to kind of be in both worlds of what are corps doing it at the highest level, what are those systems like, what are those processes like, and then being able to bring that back to local high schools, people we service here at Synced Up, and those sort of things. So
Got it. Very cool. So basically trying to get in where you fit in,
Yeah.
like this industry and the marching arts is a trade. Of course you have your band directors who are, quote, formally educated and there to do music education type stuff, but in the end they end up hiring people like us to come and do the auxiliary parts of the band, that whether it's new, like electronics in the past
Right.
decade or so, has been kind of a need for groups to compete at a level they want to. People like you can come in and help fill in the void and help fill places of ignorance that most people have with
Sure.
it. A lot of fear and ignorance around it, but everybody knows they need it at this point. And the thing that I really enjoy about sound design is it helps meet the audience where they're at, and the students where they're at with what they're listening to every day, with overproduced music, watching overproduced movies that have a lot of synthetic
Just high
audio and
production value.
yeah, it's just a lot of production value, and I think that brings such an awesome element to marching bands, because it now elevates the experience for the members and for the audience and everybody to something they're definitely more closely used to. So let's kind of get into it. So I'm a new band director. I just started. I'm 24, 25 years old, fresh out of college, was not trained in any kind of audio gear, but now I'm thrown into a situation to where I now have to manage it or hire somebody to come in. Like, what are some basic components and terminology that would be used on a high school level to really get a new band director like up and moving to be able to speak the language?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of sound system components, obviously, we see are very vast and can range anywhere from really small to really big. Understanding that most sound systems utilize a stereo speaker system, that just means left and right. And usually that's consistent of 12-inch, 15-inch loudspeakers and 18-inch subs, or some combination of the two. Really popular speakers now would be like line array systems or constant directivity, like hybrid point source type of speakers as well. So obviously a main set of stereo speakers. The mixing console that you use, whether it's digital or analog, that's basically how you run all of your microphone channels to the mixer, that you are then able to balance levels, do simple processing on certain channels, and then feed that signal to your speakers. So we've got our stereo kind of speaker system. We have our mixer. Microphones, obviously, to mic keyboards, which are probably the most commonly mic'd element in any sort of marching bands. Synthesizers, whether it be a modular synth that has sounds built into it, or if they're using a secondary program like MainStage to trigger sounds through MIDI controllers. That's obviously very common now. So
you can get those pretty cheap too.
Yeah, like so a lot of these elements, people are turning over sound systems all the time. There's plenty of places and opportunities to find like used gear. There's Marching Arts Audio Facebook page that has a marketplace where people are constantly, again, just like, hey, we're upgrading our sound system. Here's our old sound system. It's fairly inexpensive, and that would be a good place to look, especially when you're trying to find a new system or build a new system for the first time, to kind of look there and get something pretty relatively cheap that still works and helps you get going. But in addition to those elements, those would probably be the main ones, right? The microphones for your keyboards, some sort of electronic synthesizer setup, main speakers, and then a mixer that is able to run all those connections and then get those out to your speakers. Power source is another one. Generators, most common. House power can be used, but not always the most reliable. We're seeing as battery technology is getting more advanced, standalone batteries can be used to power systems. But again, just when we're talking about basics, those are kind of sort of the
Sure.
basic.
Can you talk a little bit about power? Because I think that's where a lot of people make the mistake, is where they undervalue the amount of power they need to push their equipment.
Right.
And really the consistency that's needed with that. So if you're in a rehearsal and you're used to using a generator and you are used to getting a certain amount of power, and then you go to a situation where you go to a stadium and the juice in the stadium may or may not be used to what you're using, or maybe the gauge of extension cord you're using may not be able to push the kind of power. And I know people have, out of ignorance, have just put themselves in some weird positions along with the members, because now your power's out or something blew on a very big impact.
Right.
And that's typically where you'll see the stuff cut out, is when the volume kind of comes up and there's a lot of juice that's needed, and the house power or extension cord can't handle it, and then now you're without sound for the remainder or whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
there's a lot of elements that factor into power draw in a system. It's always important to understand the specs of the speakers that you're using. Looking at max power draw versus continuous power draw on speaker systems, being able to add that all up and figure out exactly what size generator that has that power output is able to provide for that. And also understand that the gauge cable that you're using in returns to power, you can think of the bigger the gauge, which is the smaller the number, being kind of like the pipe that the water travels through when we're talking about plumbing. The bigger the cable, the more current you're allowing in your system, which means those elements that draw the most power are able to get that power that they need. But again, it's for any band director, for any person building a system for the first time that is looking at their power source, always consult with either an audio systems designer who can help you figure that out for you, or even better, an electrician. Because what we fail to realize is that, again, that element of sound systems is very important. It's becoming a safety issue too, with regards of how much power we're able to draw. Like, I'm sure there's been plenty of moments where we're around a sound system, we touch something, we get shocked, and then we're trying to figure out exactly how that happens, and and that could lead to some bigger issues.
Rubbing some feet on some carpet and walking up and going pop.
Yeah, that could be detrimental. you know? And again, that's just one of those things that as we as an activity are getting more advanced in, that we're needing to have more expertise in and have more knowledge in, and is like kind of going into uncharted territories for most, but again, the resources are there, the people are there, and I think it's important to utilize that.
Right, and when we're talking about power, at Synced Up Audio, we make a generator cart, which allows groups to rehearse and perform consistently, because the whole point is, if you can rehearse with the same size generator, you take it on the road, it's in our cart, you wheel it out there, and it's off to the side, and now for sure you're going to have the right power to push whatever you need in that stadium, and peace of mind is everything.
Yeah, peace of mind, consistency, anything you can do to build consistency in your system from practice, rehearsal to show and performance, then that's just going to set you up for success in a lot of ways.
Right, and the good thing is we build those generator carts specifically for whatever generator somebody has, right?
Yeah,
we size them
up, custom design them, get them the right specs and everything. So strap the generator in makes it a lot easier and more mobile, because most generators don't have the easy mobility function. So obviously we want to make that easy for people.
Sure, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of the types of microphones that are needed on specific instruments in different situations?
For sure. So it's important to understand that the two biggest type and kind of microphones that we use, especially in this activity, would be dynamic microphones and condenser microphones. The biggest, I guess, general difference between those is the build of how the microphones are built, the features that those microphones come with. Condensers normally have pads and switches that you can do to change the pickup quality of the microphone, while dynamic usually don't. Condensers, we say, can be a little bit more sensitive, but that's only because we provide it with phantom power, which is a 48 volt current that allows the microphone to be active. And then the ways you would utilize the difference between the dynamic and condensers would, for example, drum set, right? Drum set is a very high transient instrument, right? There's a lot of peaks, there's not a lot of sustain. Everything is high SPL in that regard. So a dynamic microphone that is closely miking those drums would be the best practical use of dynamic microphones in order to best pick up the quality of instrument. The most famous right now that we know is the Shure SM57. People love to say that microphone can be put on anything and sound good, and I truly believe that. Like if you know where to put that microphone in any instance, you're going to end up getting really good quality sounds that you can do a lot with. So 57s are very common on drum set, especially on snare and toms and stuff like that. Condensers. The other side of the spectrum here is for marimbas, vibraphones, where we have a very large range of instrument that we're trying to pick up, and we can't necessarily afford to spend all that money to mic a marimba the same way we would do like in a studio setting to really pick up the best quality of sound. And we're also looking for microphones that are rugged, can handle the terrain of the road and being on tour and stuff like that, and kids who may not know a lot about
yeah, there's a lot of that happening out there.
And so having those type of microphones, again, like people use different types for everything, but most commonly the AT2035s or the 2020s are used a lot on marimbas and vibes, and that's because the pickup pattern of those are cardioid and they have a pretty wide range. And when you get them far enough from the board, you're able to pick up a larger section of the board. So we're able to split that up over the marimba and try to get as much of the marimba as possible. So using like the 57, for example, you would have to get a little bit closer to the board and you won't pick up as much of a range of the board in some instances. So again, it really just comes down to placement, it comes down to use, and understanding that difference.
Yeah, so Nick, when we're talking about using microphones on a marimba or anything that's attached to a frame of sorts, what are some best practices to avoid getting frame noise or just, any kind of noise that the instrument could make just by playing on it?
Yeah, so there's these neat little contraptions.
Any other noise besides the ones you want to hear?
Correct. To avoid any of that bleed. Yeah, so neat little contraptions called shock mounts that basically suspend a microphone on like these nylon cords, and that allows the microphone to basically any sort of shock or movement or sound from where the microphone is attached, that shock absorber of the shock mounts allows that to dissipate before it enters and interferes with any sort of signal going into the microphone. So utilizing shock mounts with any type of microphone, especially if you're miking it like marimbas where there can be a lot of frame noise, vibraphones where you're getting a lot of pedal noise too, shock mounts definitely help with that.
Sure. Now let's talk about the name of shotgun mic. and what it really does and how people use it and how it should be used?
Yeah, so when you think about shotgun mics and field mics, that's another common term, you really have to think of the application of which you're using the mic. A shotgun mic is usually a longer barreled mic. The throw or the distance of pickup is usually pretty long on those, but it's a very focused, narrow pickup as well.
Right, and I think that's where the confusion for me came in for a while. Everybody calls this thing a shotgun mic.
Right.
Well, if anybody out there has ever shot a shotgun, unless it's, it's buckshot, right?
Sure.
Shotgun. It's going to spread out. So the terminology was very confusing for me because I was thinking we're getting a wider spread, but it was actually the opposite of that. It's more distance, right?
It's more distant. Again, it also just depends on the type of microphone, and there are stereo shotgun microphones that are made that actually allow for spread to happen, a stereo spread. But most commonly, like what we're seeing, like people use the most of are true shotgun mics that the name really just comes from like the length of the actual microphone being it.
Okay, that's very confusing.
Correct,
sure.
correct. But the main application that we see it for, like non-band related, would be like dialogue, or like in a news scenario where you're really like there's a bunch of people talking, you have a shotgun mic, and you can literally just aim it at the person that's talking, and you're able to pick up that.
So,
person
like in news, not news, but like sports broadcasting, we see the guy with the mic and like the big funnel umbrella. Is that a shotgun mic?
Yeah. So
or a version of that?
It could be. Yes, it's usually.
Or they're trying to pick up the conversations
right.
on the. Okay.
You'll most commonly see it actually attached to the camera on top with a similar filter like this, a very long barrel, and that's because they're just trying to pick up whatever they're aiming at that moment. So in our application, it's a similar situation where when we want to use a shotgun mic, an actual shotgun mic, we got to think about we are focusing on this specific moment on the field or this specific person or section, and are trying to pick up just that. The other type of mics that we see being used are like the VP88 from Shure, which is a stereo condenser mic. I believe it's also a shotgun, terminology-wise, but it allows for a good long throw pickup, but also allows for different spreads of stereo. And you actually can run that microphone in stereo. It's a 5-pin connection that splits into 2 3-pins, which allows you to run it in stereo, 2 channels. So you do have a little bit more control of your width and what you're picking up, like on the left versus on the right versus in front. But the other kind would be like pencil condensers. We use pencil condensers at Music City. What that allows us to do is actually get less of a throw, but more of a spread. And that's because we are, again, application. Why do we want to use this? We're wanting to pick up more of a spread of the field of our performers, rather than trying to pick up something that's happening in the distance. And that all comes down to like balance and mix and how we do
so
that.
Really in the end, like if you use a field mic, you have to really then determine if you want it to be a shotgun or a condenser.
Correct. Always think about application and why.
And always know that it's opposite of what it sounds like. Right. So when you're thinking of a condenser, you're going for a wider spread. For a shotgun, you're going for a more narrow.
Yeah, like when we're talking about like the pencil condenser specifically, we're talking about like it's a small, skinny microphone that looks like a pencil, I guess.
Yeah.
A writing utensil.
Sure. Yeah, I wish sometimes the terminology for us laymen was a little more
and like
user-friendly on the use of it,
Sure,
I guess.
sure.
So, but anyways, I digress because clearly I know nothing about it, and that's why you're around, which is awesome. So for people out there that just think, okay, I've got to put up a shotgun mic or a condenser mic or a pencil, right? Mm-hmm. And you're wanting to just throw that out there to pick up the band, right? And you want to get louder. A lot of times people do that without realizing that those are design choices, and meaning that the percussion is typically put in a position to not be picked up in that mic, meaning the battery. Or pick up parts of the winds that may not necessarily need to be picked up. And talk a little bit about that, about the forethought that is really needed.
So definitely want to have a lot of forethought in the visual design process when you know you are going to be utilizing field mics of sorts, whether it's shotguns or another type. it really does, again, it does affect like bleed coming from mics. It does affect how you're picking them up. It does affect, again, the application. Why do we want to use the mics here? Is it because we want to pick up the section? Do we want to pick up the entire ensemble? The height of which you deploy the microphone can also affect that depending on the type of microphone you have. So if you have, say, like flutes and clarinets that can sometimes normally be staged closer to the front sideline just because that's the nature of the instrument, well, it doesn't help them that we are also reinforcing our front ensemble, which is right in front of them, in addition to electronics and soloists and other elements that might also be coming through the system. So we might say, okay, our woodwind friends might need some help here. Let's get these specific type of microphones a little bit lowered on deployment in that same area and have them mixed in a way that we are just enhancing what they're playing or showcasing a certain moment or a feature. But like, again, all those sort of decisions have to be coordinated ahead of time. Otherwise, you might find that you chase your tail with certain things.
Yeah, I can attest to, there's definitely been a part of some programs like, cool, it's a new fad, let's put this thing out there without even realizing that there's a lot of, measuring twice, cut once type of scenario that's got to go on before you do that. And because if not, you're going to get worse problems on the back end without the planning. In other words, I see a lot of just drums coming through the mic because they just put it out there. They're just trying to capture everything. And mic up their 40 or 50 person band to try to compete with people above them, which is normal, right?
It can be.
Yeah, and but if you're not thinking about it smartly, then you can kind of put yourself in a worse position because now you're dealing with poor music adjudication, effect issues, because now the drums are probably overbalancing the flutes who are actually meant to be out there to be focused. So there's a lot of issues that can be without planning.
And on that point about like smaller bands wanting to compete with bigger bands, I think it's important for any director or staff member that is a part of a smaller organization that the use of field mics doesn't make you more competitive. That's why we have classifications, right? That's why we have these groups competing against groups that are similar size, is because they need to, we're always...
You have to judge against your peers.
Exactly. And I don't think we should at least have that sort of mentality when we are assessing using field mics or upgrading our audio system in those sort of ways. Is we need to look at who our competitors might be and kind of base it off of that. It's like you can still be a very well-balanced and in tune and with great musicality and great execution. Because
the miking is only going to make louder whatever's coming out of the instrument.
What comes in comes out, right? So like using it as a crutch is not always the best option, or using it to supplement what you're not getting is also not the right answer either. You really, again, what goes in comes out all the time. And it's okay if your smaller band does sound like a smaller band, as long as you're, again, teaching the right things and you're already well mixed and balanced internally comparatively. So
sure. What are some common mistakes you've seen people do in audio setups and how to avoid them?
Yeah. So fail safes are very important. And what I mean by that is having a plan B and C in case something were to go awry. And we, especially with the groups that I work with, and that's just something that's very important to me, is process and protocol when it comes to certain things, and documentation. So what I mean by that is we always use some sort of resource like a workspace platform that houses a lot of information that we can use throughout the season as a resource, that being manuals for certain pieces of gear, that being diagrams of how everything's supposed to be set up, that being levels that we need to be trying to set preemptively before shows, speaker angles, like anything like that helps us have a better and more successful program. So building in fail-safes, and what I mean by that is most digital mixing consoles have the ability to back up the show file or the project file that you're working on, and you can put that on like an external hard drive or USB, and then from there upload it to like a Google Drive or Dropbox. What that allows is that if, again, God forbid, something happens to your system, you're able to recall that show file, pull it up on the same board or a different board, like a newer version, like if that board goes no longer functions, and then be able to pick up where you left off in a lot of ways. It saves all your routing, it saves all your levels, your scenes, everything. So it's really as quickly as just recalling it. Those sort of fail safes are super important. Main stage, again, a very important tool being utilized now, backing up main stage files in a similar fashion where you're saving the file that you just did that day with all your adjustments, you're backing those up on external hard drives, and then you're also uploading them to like a Google Drive or Dropbox. And that allows for having it on an online drive platform like that, also allows for someone like me who may not be on the road at that time or at that rehearsal to actually open up that file, make adjustments, and send it back, and then you're able to pull it back up in rehearsal. And I didn't have to get on a plane to do it. And that, again, that builds in a little bit more confidence in your system, that builds in a better process. Redundant main stage rigs, again, are very common, having 2 computers running simultaneously. Other fail-safes would be, in terms of just like the analog side of things, backup cables. Extra cables for like your most important pieces of connections. We like Ethernet connections that connects like digital stage boxes to mixers are very important, especially if one is housed internally in the front ensemble and the mixer is up front. You lose that connection, you lose everything. So we always have an extra loom of that available in case that cable fails. We also build in extra ports that can easily be switched out in a quick moment. So again, fail safes are great. Like,
basically building in redundancy to facilitate anything that could happen when a high school freshman does something wrong on a synth. You've got some kind of redundancy or
cable
backup
breaks
plan.
in the parking lot.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that people underestimate is the value in teaching your students the equipment that they're using.
Yeah.
Right. And the cool thing I find is you're always going to have that one kid that's really interested and fascinated about the electronics, because it is kind of a trade, right? At some level, you're not having to learn fingerings of a flute or a trumpet or anything like that. But what you're doing is you're learning a skill and a trade that you can take with you along with music education, and you're really doing a lot for the band as far as effect and things like that. So what are some things that could help a band director make that more consistent and the fail-safe? So for me, I like low-hanging fruit, like coloring the cables.
Sure.
To making sure you have a good test when you go into a show for the audio that works, right? So talk a little bit about that. Like, what is your process when you go on? Everything's set up, everybody's stressed out. How do you do an audio test so that the audience doesn't really know you're doing an audio test?
Yeah, so it all starts with, do you have a plan of action for getting on the field and getting off the field? I always try to utilize the performers for that situation because they are more consistent in terms of being there. I know a lot of bands might need to rely on like parent volunteers or staff members, but again, that can change show to show, game to game, everything. So to avoid having to teach and reteach these people how to run a cable from one thing to another and plug it in a certain way, utilizing your students, utilizing your performers who are going to be consistent. It gives them some sort of responsibility that they can take ownership in, and B, it builds consistency in those sort of things and allows you to, if something were to happen, trace it back to a specific person even, and then use that as a learning moment for them and a teaching moment for you.
Sure, but audio wise, like if I go out there and I'm like, cool, let's get an audio check.
Yeah.
I've seen situations where people stand in front of speakers.
Yes.
And they just give a thumbs up. I've seen the, audio sound that goes around everything.
Yeah.
And I've also heard maybe the opening sample come on, and just to make sure that works.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of giving away the show before you're giving away the show, I guess.
Right.
So what is some of the easiest things that somebody could do to like test their equipment in front of everybody?
Yeah, the easiest thing, like you were saying, like have someone in front of every speaker that is able to hear sound coming out. And then you want to check your electronics and acoustic instruments. So most of the time, the acoustic instruments, once everything's plugged in visually on the mixer, you can see level. So you may not need to do a sound check for those specific instruments, but you're not going to see levels from electronic instruments until something is triggered or played. So what I like to do is I like to have the synth player play something like just a chord on their piano, and that activates, like if you play it in a higher register, that'll activate like all of our main speakers, and then if they play it down in a lower register, that then activates the subs. So we're able to activate our entire speaker array by simply playing either one or like a single chord that spreads over the whole keyboard or something like that. I've also designed samples that are meant to pan from one side to the other so that we're hearing the full stereo spectrum of the system while also providing low ends to activate the subs. And then again, that shows level on the board, that makes something audible, and you can be creative with those sort of samples too and have it fit some like the theme that you're about to have. Another one that we see commonly is like a pre-show. So like if the pre-show works and the pre-show plays underneath the announcement, then that, again, is an indicator of a sound check. So there's a lot of different ways.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the pre-planning so that your setup does go smoothly in that minute and a half that we're frantically getting on the field. You know, talk about training your students to color code certain things, to have individuals that are with certain gear that's in charge of, you know, hey, Johnny, you're going to plug in this speaker, you're going to bring that cable over to the person that's standing in front of the mixer or synth, wherever the mixer's at, right? And then of course, you've got other people, maybe variables, the parents that might be bringing on some other things. But the big thing you want to start with is color coding your cables.
Yeah, that's the easiest.
And having things already kind of pre-connected or whatnot with your board, so when you show up, you can just daisy chain things together, right?
Sure, yeah. The easiest thing you can do is color code and label connection points, especially if those connection points ever come disconnected at any point and either to transport the system. Having as many things connected and ready to go and on before pushing on is obviously going to help.
And that's the benefit of having the battery pack, right?
Like UPS batteries, uninterruptible power supply batteries. There's a ton of great options that are
and they're
rack
getting
mountable.
cheaper and cheaper.
They're getting cheaper. I mean, as with any battery, they're going to need to be replaced over time. But most of the internal batteries on those can be replaced. So
the purpose of that is you can have all your stuff working in the lot.
Sure.
You have your computer on. You have all the things that might take a few seconds to boot up that now are already on. You've already tested that. You got your wireless system cranking. You're testing your soloist in the end zone or the back, whatever that is in the lot. And then when you come onto the field, you have way less to test. You have way less to turn on. You're not frantically waiting or desperately waiting for your computer to boot up for some reason. And the kid doesn't have the school password. I mean, I've seen it all, right?
Yeah.
So it's better to have all that stuff working in the lot before you come in, because when you push it in, you're just plugging stuff in, and then you're just, boop, we're ready to go.
Right, yeah, that batteries are a huge component of that. But, you know, like going back to like running cables and that sort of thing, like, again, the color coding process is very important. Using resistor color coding order, which is probably the most common. It's just the color of the rainbow in order that way, so you can determine things a lot quicker. Don't underestimate the time that it takes to rehearse an on and off, right? Like, often too many times we forget that getting on the field is actually pretty important and has a logistic challenge involved with that.
And a penalty.
And penalties, like easily, like especially when it comes to getting on and getting the thumbs up to start the show. So utilizing rehearsal time, if you are relying on parent volunteers, like utilizing a rehearsal time to have them come in and help with the on and off is going to be super beneficial, and spending time with the students who might be doing that, because again, accountability, ownership, everything that a student needs in order to make that happen. And then that just makes the setup and tear down process a lot smoother. Having people in place to check speakers, having a protocol where whoever's running the board or the mixer at that time and your synths to have like a finger symbol system if they need something. Like me, rather than give away the beans, I like to make eye contact. So basically when my synths are ready, they're making eye contact with me, and I know that when I'm ready on my end, I start making eye contact with them. So there's this weird, awkward, awesome, like 5 seconds of eye contact, and then and then I give them a nod, and they do the sound check, and then it's great, and then like no one knows that it happens because it's very subtle. So I do
having the secret handshake with the kids.
Exactly,
you gotta
just like a
have
mental connection, and I think that can be a cool thing too.
Can you talk about the difference in wireless mics and being wired, especially for soloists, like the challenges that go with each one of those and pros and cons?
Yeah, sure. Obviously, one of the biggest differences is cost when we're talking about investing in one or the other. Most wireless systems, like just a rough number here, could cost you $1,000 per channel, right? That's $1,000 of investment on a single channel of a microphone. Obviously, it's going to be way cheaper to throw a microphone on a stand and run an actual XLR cable to a connection point and do it that way. The biggest pro, obviously, with doing the wire connection is cost. The cons that I found with doing wired over wirelessly is the potential inconsistencies in placement, whether it be from a performer or parent volunteer or staff member setting up the microphone. Some ways to avoid that would obviously, like, we see a lot of wired mics on props and stuff where you can actually like drill in.
It's always in a
bass.
consistent spot.
It's always going to be in a consistent spot. You know, you might add variables like height and that sort of thing. But then it also comes down to the performer, right? Are they consistently standing at the same distance from the mic? Like, you can hear here, like being here versus being back here creates a huge quality difference. And that can be the difference in this EQ notch that we did to bring out this certain element of the instrument that we no longer get when the microphone is like this. So that can be probably the biggest con with that sort of thing. Again, that makes the wireless being more pro. Having the microphone that's clipped on a bell that is consistent, it stays exactly like that. You can do things to the microphone so that it doesn't bend certain directions.
Yeah, and especially when you're dealing with like wired mics, we've had issues with like the player. They're trying to play in the moment, and yet they're focused on this one spot that they have to play to make it sound great.
Right.
And when you have a wired mic, it makes it hard to do, right?
Sure.
And when it's clipped to the horn, it's always consistent. You've tested it.
Mobility is a lot easier. So, you know, and we love to see our performers perform just like that. And sometimes being tied down to a microphone where you have to have it be a certain way and play it a certain way can change that. But again, the con with wireless could be signal, just like RF consistency. You know, again, wireless it has a learning curve if you don't understand it at first.
I think one of the biggest things people don't understand about wireless is like, oh, it's great at your rehearsal, right?
Right.
You don't have 10,000 people sitting around you with cell phones that are trying to find a signal and stuff. You know, you got some janitor calling trucker, can I get some toilet paper over here in bathroom 3 or whatever.
The big interference comes from especially heavily populated like metropolitan areas. And so like doing scans, like a lot of wireless systems allow you to do scans with the system, so you can actually see on a graph what's going to be the better frequencies to use versus not, or just checking online resources like Shure and Sennheiser both have online resources.
Yeah, talk about that, because I know, you know, during drum corps, marching band, our audio person is always checking the frequency of the stadium, right? The open frequencies.
Right.
And I think that not a lot of people know that. Like, if you don't have an audio person, you're just showing up from show to show and wondering why your stuff isn't working as well as it does at rehearsal,
right,
then that might be something you want to kind of look into, is making sure you're hopping on the right highways in the air that are available.
Yeah. One of the great things that Drum Corps is offering and has been offering for a while is frequency coordination through Frequency Coordination Group. And what that allows them to do is send out a form at towards the beginning of tour that basically asks you for the brand, make, and model and quantity of the wireless system that you're using. And then they're actually able to come up with, these are the frequencies that you need to set your systems to in order for everything to work and everything be in the green. And they do it in a way that if someone else uses like a similar system, they might assign them the same frequencies, but you guys might go on 3 or 4 spots away from each other so that there's not that interference.
Right.
And there's definitely some rules in place where it's like you can't turn on your wireless before or after these certain times to avoid stuff like that. And so that's a very great thing that's happening in drum corps right now, especially for the larger regional shows.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of money and time that are put into this, and like that kind of back end work that DCI is doing, or the team of people that are doing for that, I think is That's awesome.
It's very beneficial. And again, we're still trying to fight for that sort of thing, especially at like the BOA or US bands level, or even just like local circuit shows too. Like we can definitely provide frequency scan files of a certain show that get posted on Facebook that then the directors can find and utilize going into that show. Again, it's very helpful, very beneficial when getting all that stuff coordinated.
Sure. No, that's awesome. So what kind of advice would you give to someone that's just getting into it? They see the opportunities that are available out there. Maybe they're an intern in college or trying to get through college as an audio engineer, and they're wanting to experience higher level groups to get some real life experience, or wanting to kind of meander around town and try to get on with a local high school band. Like, what's the process of that?
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm saying this, because like I come from an era where you kind of had to make your own way on certain things.
Got to be a jack of all trades.
Well, yeah, but you also got to offer your services for free a little bit so people can see that you are worth whatever you're talking about.
Right.
Too often people are like, I just want to get into this, so pay me. It's like, well, you might be ruining my band every day, so I'm going to pay you for that.
Yeah. I like to think of any sort of opportunity as like you're earning your position. So anybody that is wanting to get into like audio and the marching arts world, like having knowledge, like pre-existing knowledge or training in audio fundamentals, whether even if it's just I took a few classes in college, or I watched the Audio University YouTube channel that has a lot of great resources, or I played synth at a world-class drum corps for X amount of years, so I'm pretty familiar with how that stuff is. Any sort of pre-existing knowledge you can have before going to a high school or a drum corps or indoor program to offer those sort of services can help out a lot. Drum corps are always, at least those with like audio captions and audio teams, are usually always offering some sort of internship position. And those applications can easily be found online or on the websites or posted on social media.
And the cool thing is, like, when this first started, there's like one person.
Yeah.
And now there's
Or it's the front ensemble tech.
Right, it was the front ensemble tech that was like, oh, by the way, guess what else you got to learn?
Yeah, I got to go do this.
Yeah, and but
I feel we are moving away from that more and more.
Oh no, absolutely. Like, it has to be. Like, it's
be.
more than a 2-person job even at this time. But no, I guess what I'm saying is there's more and more opportunity, even with one group, to kind of get on with a team of 8 people that are kind of going throughout the summer.
There's more opportunity and there's more resources now than ever as far as people who do it, Facebook pages that have information, even like text and literature for academia. There's starting to be more and more of that available for marching arts.
Right, and I think the interesting thing is, like, aside from audio engineering, I've got tons of audio engineer friends here in Nashville. Like, there's like throw a rock, you hit 5, right?
Yeah.
They're all around. But the thing that I've always been kind of enamored with is in our activity, like, we all clearly have trained professionals that know what they're doing. But the fact that we found this niche thing that we are able to produce this thing off-site, go to a show, take our whole situation, load it up, and sound as good as we did at practice, but we do all that in a minute and a half and set up, because there's so much planning that goes in before that when I talk to my audio engineer friends, they can't even fathom what we have to do.
I think it's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy. It is crazy. But I think it puts, in my opinion, marching arts audio people above some of the things that I've seen, because of the type of planning that has to go into certain things, the type of equipment that's being used, just the versatility of what we have to do in our situation to get the type of production that's needed. Mm-hmm. Like, I find a lot of value in the marching arts engineers just because of that. Everybody's pretty talented and smart and can really work around with, the obstacles that are given, right?
Yeah.
And what can you kind of say about that?
It's no secret that the activity is very niche. It's very unique. It does raise a lot of challenges day in, day out, and the people who are able to excel in our activity in those positions that go on to maybe work in like commercial live sound or touring live sound end up excelling there and far surpass maybe
this is
peers.
easy.
Yeah, like it could, they might find it a
Depending
lot
on what the
easier.
situation is, it could
Depending
be
on the
easier,
situation,
yeah.
for sure. And like some of my best friends are doing things at a really high level in commercial live sound, or even just like working in a recording studio or anything like that, or doing music production. It's just having those skills that you learn when in regards to just like being able to work on your feet, being able to troubleshoot, being able to, again, deploy a system in one place and then pack it up and drive an hour away and deploy it there in less than a minute is it's pretty mind-boggling. And we're not far off as far as like the equipment we use compared to like a lot of touring live sound kind of productions, especially like smaller ones, or even some of the venues we see up and down Broadway, like the equipment they use, like we're a little bit more advanced than Broadway, like in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
So you know, it's seeing that and knowing that if you can really maximize your worth in this activity, it does set you up for success in other avenues.
It does. And while we're on that, kind of talk a little bit about the equipment that how it's protected and how easy it is to get on and off the field for the use of like our audio carts, right?
Yeah.
And like just kind of, and before that there was, band dads were doing band dad specials, and a lot of times they looked great, sometimes they didn't.
Sure.
And there's been companies that have kind of popped up in the past that have kind of like helped pave the way for certain things.
Yeah.
And in the norm, but like talk a little bit about some of our audio carts that benefit people and
Yeah,
how they get on
definitely.
and off the field.
And like obviously over the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen carts and electronics evolve in parallel with one another based on needs and what we're able to supply. So obviously like cost effective was one of the ones. So we made them out of wood and we put the baby casters on them, and then we found that didn't work. So obviously what we see most common now is steel. No flat casters, very rugged.
Fire retardant plastic.
Exactly, like ABS, plastic for everything. And because, if you're spending all this money and time and energy on the gear, you probably want to spend just as much on the carts and cases that you use to protect it and transport it day in, day out, because that is the foundation of what your system is being built on, truthfully and realistically. So yeah, those what we offer here at Synced Up is, as far as our audio cart products, are very much meant to be something that you can rely on, something that you can trust in any sort of situation.
Well, they're customizable too, based off of your
Customizable.
needs,
Yeah.
And like with any business, like you survive off the solution that you provide to a problem.
Right.
And I feel like the solution that we're providing is really top notch on that end and protects people's equipment. We have a story from probably 2 years ago at Ravenwood when a speaker brand new
picture in my head.
brand new speaker and a cart, and somebody didn't lock the wheels on something and it fell off an edge of like 3 foot high. The cart got a little damaged and dinged up, but the speaker was salvageable,
Right.
Yeah. And it was a big deal. And like just the fact that we could ding out a dent and the cart and the speaker was saved, like that's huge, And aside from holding the equipment, it protects the equipment on that end.
Yeah,
'Cause that was a pretty big fall.
Yeah, it was a pretty big fall, and like, I've also seen synth carts topple over, which they're not supposed to do, so don't do it. But yeah, so and again, like you get it back up, you're like fix everything that might have gotten messed up, and you're like, oh, everything still works. This is awesome. Like nothing detrimental happened. And again, like the cart aspect of the activity is becoming more and more important for those sort of things. And again, like, why wouldn't you want to protect your gear the same way that you protect your tubas and your flutes and cases and stuff like that? Like, we definitely want that to be a priority for people, for sure.
Yep. Before we get off here, talk a little bit about the future of audio in the marching arts. Like, where do you see it going, or do you just really see us like with the iPhone? We just got to learn how to use it first.
Yeah.
Because we have this, high-end technology that's around us, and we're barely scraping the ceiling of what we're capable of.
Right.
And we see this a lot with technology where it gets used by the top 1% and then they expand it and kind of leave a lot of people in the dust a little bit.
Right.
And how do you get people caught up? It's a little different than the question I asked you, but how do you get people caught up so there's more people using more of the technology? To me, that's where I kind of see the future is, right? Getting more people acclimated to it. But aside from that, talk a little bit about the technology aspect and maybe where you see some future uses going.
Yeah, I think as far as like the technology we're using in our activity versus the technology available, we're pretty close as far as like what's commonly found, especially at a high level drum corps, and the systems they use. I mean, I always use Blue Coat's 2016 as a reference when they had a really spread out front ensemble and they used in-ears for the first time, and everyone accused them of cheating because they thought they were running a metronome. And reality is like that technology was not new to the industry as a whole.
No,
that has been around. That was around for a very long time leading up to that point, but that was new for us. So we were scared of it because we thought that cheating was involved. We thought, and it wasn't. But again, that's just kind of like where technology is and where we as an activity has slowly started to meet up with itself. And we're starting to utilize wireless microphones a lot more. We're utilizing in-ear monitors a lot more. We're utilizing, speaker systems that are commonly found on the road a lot more. Not in the same quantity that we do, but as far as seeing where it can go in the future and where it is now, I think we're doing more now as far as education goes as an activity on what we're doing. There's more people teaching college level classes. There's more people publishing books and resources and giving presentations at trade shows on it. So that is allowing for the community to kind of catch up to where the technology is. I think as long as we are educated in what we're using, then we as an activity can see the technology in like commercial live sound and what people are doing on pro rigs carry over a lot more and feel a little bit more comfortable. But it also goes back to, do we really need the advanced technology that's being used at those levels? Like, depends on what you're utilizing.
Maybe not, but
maybe not.
This is all an arms race, though. At some point, but when you're dealing with competition, there has to be a sense of capitalism in there. That nobody starts with equality in there, right? Like everybody has their own fundraising efforts, right? And inside that comes with getting the gear that you need to be the most competitive and entertain the audience, right?
Yeah.
And some people look at that budget differently than others and use it differently, But in the end, it can be viewed as an arms race from certain groups out there. And as someone who owns a business and kind of understands the competitive level of that, I kind of welcome it,
Sure, yeah.
Because, some people will gripe, oh, they're just doing whatever. It's like, yeah, but without them doing that, or other groups doing whatever they're doing, the other groups don't catch up, right? And they don't see the value and the need to compete, so things become stagnant, right? And that's no fun.
Yeah.
Like everybody wants to have goals.
Yeah. For an activity that's super creative, we can sometimes find that there's obviously going to be some sort of box or restrictions that it puts us in regards to just like venues and rules and stuff like that. But doing anything we can from a creative aspect to kind of showcase like, hey, we're not just deploying 6 stacks of speakers because we're trying to blow everyone's face off. We're doing it because we're doing things design-wise that allows us to be more immersive with our setup. And like, again, educating people on like why one is better than the other or like more commonly used than the other allows us to at least like explore our possibilities a little bit more too. Yeah,
and to be fair, I've never really heard a group that cranks their brass up to be really well balanced with the full drum corps. You know what I'm saying? I've never heard it, and I know people do it out there, but I've never really heard the epitome of balance yet, to where you hear everything that's needed out there. So
sure, yeah.
Typically, like the battery just becomes people that are waving their arms back there. They're not even heard. And
you definitely get like that.
Yeah, well, it does get like that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a realm of what's approachable, because loud is an effect, you know what I'm saying, to an extent, depending on how it's used. But I'm here for it. I'm here for all of it, honestly, because this is where society is going with dealing with overproduced stuff, and to get more people in the marching arts, whether they're performers or fans. I think we have to be able to meet people where they're at in society, and I think that's where we are. So, and I think the audio and electronics and everything that's been brought in the activity has really opened the doors for opportunities for people that may not be a battery caption head somewhere, but you're an audio caption head, you know, and just having those new job positions open up really I don't know, emboldens a lot of people and provides a lot of opportunity for people that maybe not normally would have had, you know.
Yeah.
And not only that, it makes the band sound better. It makes the drum corps sound better. It makes, you know, just bigger family.
Totally.
You know? I love it. It's
Totally.
good stuff. As far as synced up audio goes, what's your plan for that? What do we got coming in the future?
Yeah, so we're going to be obviously doing a lot of cart kind of redesigns over the next couple of months. Some really cool features coming to some carts, new different models. We're definitely, one of the big things we're obviously pushing right now is our really short 2 to 3 month turn time, which is super efficient. We also are providing inventory carts that people can get right now if they need it. Just adding to the level of convenience.
Sure. And speaking of convenience, I think one of the things that I personally like that we do that I find a lot of value in is the audio services.
Right.
Where you're able to kind of go to a school and you've got your different systems set up to where it's a 3-hour rehearsal as just an overview consulting, or you're doing a complete system design and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about what those are? Because I think that's unique. There are some people out there that do it, but the thing that we do with our clients, when you buy a show from us or you design with us, we provide a free audio consultation, which then if you find that we can sell you gear, which we do, or you need somebody to physically come out and plug stuff in for you or show your students how to run stuff, that's what Nick and our team does. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so just offering services that make having systems like they see at Drum Corps a little bit more accessible when it comes to having an audio technician or engineer come out and consult during a rehearsal, whether that's taking a look at your system and showing where you could make things a little bit more efficient or upgrade a few things or help mix and balance during that rehearsal and offer some more insight on how you could get more bang for your buck on what you currently are already using. The system design one is another great one where we work with you if you're looking to either upgrade your sound system or completely overhaul it, or just looking to kind of redesign in a way that's more efficient. We obviously can help with that in regards of providing documentation, coming out, doing the actual installation of the system. Once you can get that gear through us, and then we come out and install it for you. So those are very super beneficial things that we offer that, again, make things a lot more accessible to folks and kind of just overall ups the quality of what people can do.
Demystifying some gear for some students or
Yeah.
band directors. Like, what does this light do? Because that would be me. You know,
sure.
what does this do? Show me.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, the educational factor is huge. Like part of our free consultation that we find that we do a lot of is just helping directors understand diving into main stage for the first time, like what pieces of equipment they might need for that, giving them a quick rundown of how to set it up for the first time, giving them some tools that they can use when they start mixing and balancing their main stage file with their system. So again, all very, very applicable things that, again, can just up the quality of life for
Sure. And the one thing I do like about that is, like, with our shows, we do a lot of added value, right? And one of the added value things we do is your personal time and the audio consulting, which ultimately educates them a little bit better on what they have and what maybe they don't have and what they need to kind of do the show that they just bought.
Sure.
To be able to do that correctly. So I think there's a lot of value in that. So anyways, man, I want to thank you and the media guys for all of us taking an hour or so. We do this every 2 weeks, so it's not a terrible amount of time, which is awesome. But we do this so that we can help provide some cool added value and get to talk about some unique things that we do. And now we got to get back to work. Thanks.